We've all seen it. You're playing D&D, you roll initiative, the player takes their turn, and then they pull out their phone and check out until their turn comes around again. Countless dungeon tubers have made videos telling you how to speed up combat, to minimize the time your players are waiting. Most of these are good tips, and definitely give them a try. But they don't solve the real problem. Combat isn't too slow. It's boring. Think about that for a moment. What arguably ought to be among the most intense, gripping, and engaging elements of your game ends up boring. That seems like a structural problem to me. We've got some ideas how to fix it, and we thought we'd share them with you. Depending on what specific TTRPG you're playing, some of these issues are simply baked into the game itself, but there are ways to mitigate those. We can divide the issues that make combat boring into two broad groups, narrative and mechanical. We'll look at narrative first because addressing those kinds of things don't require any rules changes, but if you'd like, you can just use the chapter guide to skip ahead to the other section. So, full disclosure, I am blatantly stealing the framework for this side of the discussion from Davi at MysticArts. The links to the videos I'm specifically referencing are down in the description, so make sure you go and check those out directly. I'm not going to try to cover that ground again, because I think he said what needed to be said in those videos. So the biggest narrative issue is likely that you're overusing a specific type of combat. Most combat encounters in TTRPGs tend to either be a skirmish or a boss fight, with the occasional ambush. Simply adding some other types will go a long way to break up the monotony of another group of goblins. After looking at what type of combat you're running, think about the purpose of the combat itself. Most combats end up being simply death matches. A roll initiative, and then the side that gets their bag of hit points emptied first loses. Meh. MysticArts explains that there are 8 different types of combat and 12 different combat objectives that you can use. That gives you 96 possible combinations to pick from. Even if you run 4 combats a session, you could run a weekly game for 6 months and never use the same combination of those events twice. That's going to go a long way to keep your players from getting bored. Another lever you can pull is to vary the environment. Now, I'm not talking about desert versus dungeon versus forest. I mean adding thematic elements that change the way the encounter plays out. Add elevation changes, introduce novel movement elements, or add in interactables. A few weeks back, I ran a combat during a campaign where I'm reframing the id ascendant encounter in Rime of the Frostmaiden, and it included a ballista as something that the players could interact with. From a purely mechanical perspective, it probably wasn't worth using. The action economy of it was rough, especially if it's being run solo, which it was. But the player that got a chance to use it absolutely loved it. That one prop brought the combat to life for that player in a way that was great to watch. One last adjustment that we're going to talk about is time pressure. This fits really well with the puzzle, actually, type of combat, but it's not exclusive to it. Adding narrative elements that will trigger at certain round counts that the PCs want to avoid or prevent can really ratchet up the pressure to make combat feel dangerous. So there's some narrative levers you can pull. Type of combat, combat objectives, the environment, and time. Now let's look at mechanics. Personally, I really enjoy structural changes that reinforce the gameplay you want to reward, so I lean heavily to this side on my own. In my mind, the biggest culprit here is the traditional initiative system. Players take their turn and then largely have nothing to do until their turn comes around again. Opportunity attacks and reactions can mitigate this somewhat, but not really all that well. Some games have tried to fix this by using side-based initiative, and I think this is a great option. I love the idea that players can intertwine their actions together, rearranging their action order to create really cinematic play moments. This method also reinforces player engagement on the enemy turns. If enemy actions are interspersed among the PCs, there's this kind of silent incentive to pay attention to the state of the battlefield immediately before your turn, but the rest of the time, it doesn't really matter as much. Side-based initiative solves that because the enemies always go right before your turn. This isn't without its risks. I watched a video a while back by Matt Colville where the dev team of Draw Steel was playtesting the Delian Tomb, and once combat started, it took the players nearly 5 minutes to work out which of them was going to go first. That's not a criticism of them as players or even of Draw Steel as a system, but it does point to a potential drawback of this initiative method, potentially introducing analysis paralysis each and every turn. We address this issue in our game Altered World by changing what initiative represents. It's not about who's faster and gets to move first. It's more about who understands what is happening better than everyone else. Because of that, we call it response. When you roll response, combatants declare actions in ascending order of the result. This means that if you win, you get to declare your actions last, knowing what all the other combatants are going to do. Knowledge is power, folks, and winning response can dramatically impact the flow of the game. Mechanically, after all actions are declared, we have a method to resolve all of them essentially simultaneously, but that's something for another video. There's another issue that contributes to lower engagement, I think, that doesn't get talked about a lot, and that's how many options does your character have? In D&D, for example, most martial characters don't have lots of different options for what they can do. I think the Battlemaster Fighter and the Monk are the notable exceptions, but if basically your whole shtick is run up and hit them or shoot them from a distance, that has the potential to get really monotonous. On the other hand, too many options can be just as bad, and the idea of a wizard spending 20 minutes reviewing every one of their spells only to end up casting a cantrip or a fireball, that trope exists for a reason. That many options can be overwhelming. I personally think this is part of why paladins are so appealing to so many players, in addition to their nearly busted power level. They seem to hit the sweet spot of things that they can do, even if they lean heavily on smite. Warlocks are similar here too. I also personally think artificers sit in this category as well. Even though mechanically they have more options than any other character, most of those options aren't things you do during combat. They're things you do ahead of time to prepare for combat, and you have a decent number of options to play through when fighting starts. So if those are the problems, what are some solutions? We've got some simple house rules that I think can really change the way combat plays at the table in a good way. And to clarify, when I say house rules, I mean table conventions, not homebrewing new mechanics. First, as a GM, if you are handholding your players through combat, stop. Now, I'm not talking about scaffolding a new player. More of that, please. I mean babysitting experienced players through the combat experience. Don't announce opportunity attacks, just move the monsters. It won't take many missed opportunity attacks before the players catch on that those are their responsibility. Likewise, when a player tells you what their character is doing, don't take on the responsibility of ensuring they maximize their action economy. Make it their responsibility to ensure that they use their action allotment appropriately. Obviously, don't implement things like this mid-game. Let your players know that you're making this change, and then give them a little bit of grace for a couple of sessions or so if they remember that they have a bonus action they wanted to use after their turn was already over. Eventually, though, you should get to a point where everyone understands that their turn is their turn, and it is their responsibility to ensure they maximize it, not yours. Another option you can do is make a simple change to initiative that forces players to pay a little more attention to the overall battlefield. And that's no one dies until the turn is over. Notionally, a D&D round of combat represents about 6 seconds of time, and it's always been this narrative device that all the action of the round is happening simultaneously, but the way we play, inherited from wargaming, doesn't reflect that. If you win initiative and can take out an enemy before they can act, they don't get their 6 seconds. The easiest way to make this shift is to adjudicate all actions within the turn, but then apply effects at the end of the turn. So for PCs and monsters alike, damage, healing, and effects don't impact the current turn. They come in before the next turn. It makes things like positioning and resource management much more interesting. You'll find that your players start looking at things like, if I can take that enemy out, they still may be able to attack me back, so cover becomes more important. Things like that. These obviously aren't the only things you can do to change how combat feels at the table. What do you think? Tell us your thoughts on narrative and mechanical ways to maximize engagement, not just make combat go fast. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Combat is a central game loop of many TTRPGs and represents life and death moments for our beloved characters. Stop trying to get it over with faster and start trying to make it matter more. Thanks for watching. I'm Travis, half of the development team at Interaction Games. We're making a new science fantasy TTRPG called Altered World. It's the game that finally lets you answer the question, what if I had a sentient woolly mammoth best friend with a howitzer on their back? If you'd like to learn more about Altered World, you can join us in our Discord or check out the free Quick Start. All those links are down below in the description. If you'd like to help us grow here, a like, comment, share, or subscription goes a long way. Until next time, keep your world altered.